Nothing in this podcast is intended as investment advice, and the people in this podcast may hold positions in the stocks they talk about. Do not buy any investment based solely on a tip or recommendation. Please do your own research. The Sunday Roast presents 12 Stocks for the 12 Days of Christmas. Merry Christmas, everyone. Thank you for listening.
Hello and welcome to the 12 Stocks for the 12 Days of Christmas. Today we're joined by Oliver Friesen, CEO of Golden Metal Resources. Merry Christmas, Oliver.
Hey, Merry Christmas as well to you guys. How you doing?
Yeah, all good. You all ready for Christmas and had a good one?
Yeah, no, it's been good so far. Obviously, it's great to reconnect with family and take a bit of a break, but we're working through it as well. But it's been good to eat a lot of food and enjoy some of the holidays so far.
Brilliant. So let's look at your first 8 months since listing. You obviously listed on the 10th of May and have had significant updates on Garfield, Pilot Mountain, MOUs, assays, offtake letter of intent, trading in the US, and much more. Do you want to just recap on how 2023 has been for Golden Metals, Oliver, please?
Yeah, of course. And I'm actually I pulled up our RNS list for, the last, like you said, 8 months here. And I noted I had to click the tab where you show more than 20 news, which I think should highlight, first of all, just the amount of news. But I think more importantly, the quality of much of this news that we put out. A lot of companies, will put out, maybe news once every 1 or 2 months, but we've been full on across the portfolio, adding value everywhere we can, staking new properties, signing important agreements, pushing forward our award strategy. So just a quick recap, and if you just give me a couple minutes here, a few of the highlights, I guess you could say, were, first of all, and this is chronological order starting from May 10th, Kevin's birthday when we listed, was the significant exploration results at Pilot Mountain being our flagship asset. And what we announced there were 5 very exciting geophysical targets that have never been drilled before that share almost identical geophysical signatures to the in-ground resource that we have there. So very, very exciting news there out of the gates. We announced our award strategy and deployment of some very strategic and important advisors on the U.S. government grant side. We're in a very unique position, owning 100% of the largest undeveloped tungsten deposit on U.S. soil at a time where I think it's, listeners are acutely aware of the importance of domestic supply chains, and especially Western world supply chains, of these really important critical minerals, tungsten being certainly one of those, considering its significant military applications, and the fact that the U.S. currently has no domestic primary production of the metal and relies heavily on China. So obviously a very important part of our strategy here is looking to tap into the billions and billions of dollars now that have been made available by the U.S. government to support domestic homegrown projects. Following that, we announced that we acquired a very exciting lithium brine asset in Nevada. That was an opportunistic staking opportunity identified by our technical team, lithium being a metal that we're very, very bullish on. And there was a drilling discovery made about 200 meters from our doorstep at those claims, which identified a very significant lithium horizon, which we believe extends onto our ground based on the conductors and the geophysical work that's been done there. So adding, once again, value to the portfolio without, spending massive amounts of money, being very opportunistic and making that acquisition for effectively pennies on the dollar. After that, we announced, as you mentioned, Phil, a very important LOI offtake agreement with Global Tungsten and Powders. Global Tungsten and Powders being the largest tungsten processing company in the U.S. And the reason this was so important and potentially overlooked by the market was when you're having these conversations with the U.S. government, there's so many sort of intangible things that they're looking at when it comes to making decisions on who gets these awards. And having an offtake agreement with a very influential and important U.S. company to process our concentrate and turn that into a metal that can then immediately enter into the U.S. supply chain was a very, very important step forward, and one that we were very excited about. Following that, we signed an MOU with a nuclear fusion company based out of the UK. Reason being, there's some staggering amounts of tungsten that will be required in the nuclear fusion industry. A number that I got from a meeting was one nuclear fusion reactor could require as much as 5% of total tungsten that is consumed globally. I mean, just imagine if there was one use case for copper that took 5% of the total consumption of that metal. I mean, people would be going crazy. So the reason it's still very much flying under the radar, nuclear fusion is obviously a very exciting but burgeoning technology. But the thing that really blew me away was the amount of R&D facilities being built. So one of the questions that was sort of a follow-up is, okay, well, maybe 10 years from now, they're going to need that tungsten. Well, the reality is these R&D facilities will be placing orders into the tungsten market in as little as 1 to 2 years. So we're going to hopefully see a very significant squeeze here on the tungsten supply demand fundamentals, which is already a very tight market given the amount of military tungsten that is being required at the moment. So following that, just moving up the list here, we announced the listing of the company on the OTC. Reason being, we are a U.S. focused business. Obviously, we're very supportive and we love being listed here in the UK. But being a Nevada focused business with such a strategic vision, one that really resonates with U.S. investors, it was very important that we gave the U.S. investors an opportunity to invest in what we're doing. On top of that, and as kind of a tie-in to the point about the intangible things that the U.S. government looks at, having an OTC listing, allowing U.S. investors to get exposure to what we're doing was a very important factor. We wanted to make sure that box was sufficiently checked. And then following that, we announced some key developments at Golconda. We announced the discovery of some feeder zones, very, very high priority drill targets. And then we followed up with permitting, trenching, and drilling permits, which we now have received, and we look forward to announcing the next steps there. And then a nice way to wrap up things in 2023, we made some very significant progress at our Garfield property. Essentially discovered a very broad and high-grade copper, silver, and gold copper porphyry footprint. As we've discussed previously with you guys, that asset has moved very quickly up that value curve, and we look forward to announcing the next steps there. So that's kind of a quick recap, and as you can tell, a lot of value and progress that we've made across the portfolio. Very productive 2023 and gets us set up really well for 2024.
Yeah. So I guess that's my next question is how do you plan or envisage to add value to the company going forward? You know, whether that be more progress at the, the various projects, Garfield on the Kibby, and also, what do you think, which catalyst do you think will add real significant value for shareholders in 24?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question. Or I guess the $10 or $100 million question, you should say. What's going to be the catalyst? Well, I think just broadly speaking, I think there's a lot of really exciting things happening in the market now. You look at commodity prices across the board, they're improving. A lot of names, specifically in Canada and Australia, are really starting to move here. I think that's a bit of a leading indicator. And a lot of these companies, and gold and metal is certainly among one of those, that is just, it's really attractive price right now with the value that we've added in 2023. And I think a lot of people are going to realize quickly here that we're entering into a very exciting bull market or bull cycle in the commodity space. So we're really well positioned with the work we've done and where we can go from here. But in terms of the catalyst that's really going to spark things here at Gold and Metal, beyond just the market improving broadly, which I think is certainly going to be the case. I mean, just look at the different assets in the portfolio and just, as someone who's invested in the space and been involved for more than 15 years now, the great thing about this industry is when a company has multiple assets in the portfolio that are all looking really attractive, the reality is it only takes one to deliver that outsized return. Right. We all invest in this space. We don't invest for, 10, 20% a year. You go into the blue chips if you're looking for that. And every, balanced portfolio should have some of those in there. But the reality is people gravitate to this sector, including myself, for those 10, 20, 100x returns. And like I said, it just takes one discovery and one asset that can deliver that. And I think if you just look across our portfolio, Pilot Mountain, the exploration upside there, and we're going to be getting to drilling in 2024. So looking to make new discoveries there and also increase what we have at Desert Scheelite there, which is the main resource zone. So that's potentially one catalyst that could really open things up here once people actually realize that there's probably 2, 3, or potentially even more times the in-ground resource that we have right now, with what we have right now being the largest undeveloped tungsten deposit on U.S. soil. On top of that, I'm sure one that listeners are asking me to talk about is the U.S. awards. And we discussed previously all the intangible things that we've done to put our best foot forward. Obviously, the U.S. government, they take some time to deliberate on these things. But we feel obviously very confident with the position that we're in and with the latest news that comes almost every week now about the importance of this domestic U.S. critical supply chain and how we fit perfectly into that. So obviously a very significant catalyst would be the announcement of U.S. non-dilutive government grant funding, which we obviously hope to have in 2024, and we could use those funds to fast track exploration and development at Pilot Mountain without having to tap into the retail market to fund that. So obviously we put a lot of great steps in place, and we've done a lot of fantastic things to make sure that we have the best chance of receiving those funds. There's been multiple grants that we either applied for or going to apply for, so we're in a great position there, and obviously a grant would be very, very material, and I think would easily count as a catalyst to really push things forward. And then Golconda Summit, Garfield, and Kibby, it's about continue to push those up the value curve, getting those to the drill ready stage, and then drilling them and looking to make discoveries. And as I mentioned, it could be any of those, right? Yeah, each of those is a lottery ticket, and they continue to look better and better. So there's a lot of different areas within the business that could deliver that big return in 2024.
Yeah, I think that's the one that, looking at the whole portfolio of assets, that's the one that really excites, is the tungsten, the Pilot Mountain. You've got, I think, the pent-up demand now for tungsten around the world with the land wars, with Ukraine. I think they're saying that the Ukraine war has depleted tungsten stocks all around the world. You've got obviously all the defense, you've got the tanks, and I think the Ukraine tanks are going to start using tungsten, swapping tungsten for uranium, etc. And then you've got the Chinese developing these weapons using tungsten as well. So, I mean, it's surely it's a matter of time before grants are given to companies like yourself for the production and to shore up this pent-up demand.
Yeah, no, it's a side of the industry that I don't talk about too much, because obviously it's a sad reality of the world we live in right now, but it is a reality, right? Geopolitical tensions are very high at the moment, and I think potentially what has exacerbated this a little bit is the fact that some of these unfriendly countries have realized the position of power they are in with the supply chains that they've managed to progress and that they've managed to secure over the last 10, 20, 30 years, while the Western world has continually shot ourselves in the foot and made exploration and development so difficult. So, I think it's potentially even a positive just for the Western countries to start to shore up these supply chains, because it just puts everyone in a bit more of a balanced position when so many countries are reliant on China, which they are right now for the list of metals that people are, the Western world's reliant on for China, it's a long one, but tungsten is very high up there because China produces over 86% of total global supply and is the US's largest import partner. It's just not a good position to be in, right? So that's how we want to kind of fit into this solution, specifically for tungsten here, is to be the only domestic source, and a number that might surprise you guys is if we went into production today with the scoping study that was done back in 2018, the tungsten from Pilot Mountain would replace almost 40% of the total tungsten imported from the US annually, 40%. And that's without going and drilling one more hole on that property. And as I mentioned before, there's a huge exploration opportunity there. So, just you can run the numbers, right? If we could increase the size of the in-ground resource 2x or 3x, and obviously the production scenario would move accordingly, you can just start to understand the significance of this one asset. We could almost, I don't want to give you too presumptuous, a lot of work to do here, but just those numbers alone, you can do the math. This asset alone could effectively replace the Chinese imports. And obviously that's so important right now, and would put the US in a much better position given all that's going on in the world right now, and the importance of tungsten in military, as well as a lot of other really important use cases like nuclear fusion and a bunch of other sort of green revolution uses that are coming to light here.
So, Oliver, is it possible that you will get more than your market cap as some sort of grant from the US government?
Well, that's a tough one to answer, Kev. What I can say is, and we publicly stated this, is that the DoD, the Department of Defense, has another sort of sub-organization called the DPA Title III. It's the fund, or one of the funding bodies, which is through the DoD, which has been funded, I think, north of $1 billion from the U.S. government for this fiscal year to deploy to mining projects which support domestic mining of specifically defense metals in the US. Now, I watch that funding body very closely and the awards that come out of there. I think the smallest fund I've seen is on the order of about 8 million US. And I think the largest is about 40 million US. And these are non-dilutive funds. So this is strictly a grant with the only caveat, or the kind of the ticker there, or the kicker, is that you have to use those funds to advance your project in the US, with the ultimate goal of those metals entering the US supply chain. So, I mean, our market cap right now, just based on those numbers alone, I think that probably answers your question. Obviously, it's no guarantee until we get the positive confirmation, but just based on the size of the grants between sort of 8 and 40 million US, I think that should probably answer your question.
Okay, great. So Pilot Mountain could be it could be the only asset in the company easily because of its magnitude, but we do have other assets. So give us an idea of the other assets, even though I think people should focus their minds that this is a tungsten play with lots of other stuff, but tungsten is the thing that is going to be, first and foremost within gold and metal resources. That's why it was rolled out of our metal resources in the first place, because of the Pilot Mountain asset. So, but give us an idea of what else is behind Pilot Mountain.
Yeah, so you rightly noted that, Kevin, that Pilot Mountain, it's our flagship asset, and for very good reason. Just the bit we've discussed today, how strategic it is, the potential government funding, the exploration upside. I mean, there's so much meat on the bones there. But one thing we've discussed in the pod as well is that in this space, it really only takes one asset to deliver those very outsized returns that we all invest in this sector for. So that's the reason why we have the other assets. They're earlier stage, Pilot Mountain, obviously with the in-ground resource. But as we continue to advance these assets, it's very clear that they're moving very quickly up the value curve and are fantastic complementary opportunities to Pilot Mountain. And on top of that, it gives our investors exposure to not only tungsten, which is just, for all the reasons we've discussed today, such an important metal today, one that I think is very much overlooked, but also you get access to copper, you get access to lithium, you get access to gold, and exposure to all those metals. I mean, if you put a list together of the metals that as we move into a very important commodity, what looks to be a super cycle, those are some of the most important commodities that people need to get exposed to. So by owning gold and metal alone, you get access and exposure to those fantastic lists of metals. But like you mentioned there, what we're doing at all those assets, Golconda Summit, very, very exciting gold opportunity in Northern Nevada. Carlin type gold being, when you talk about Carlin type gold, it's a deposit type that's very exclusive to the state of Nevada. Very unique geology that allowed those monster deposits to form. But to have a Carlin type opportunity in our portfolio, very, very exciting. I think it's the only Carlin type opportunity in the UK. The deposits that are on our doorstep are 5, 10, 15 million ounces of gold. So they're not sort of 1 million ounce deposits. And we have very, very high grade gold that's been found at surface, but no one's ever gone in and drilled the feeder zone looking for the source of that gold. So we look to be the first company to do that in 2024. Garfield's one that at the end of 2023, we've put a lot of exciting news out on that one. That one's been fantastic and really, really surprised us to the upside. We started with 3 claims there, and now we have a very large footprint with copper porphyry and copper scar mineralization over significant width and strike length. On top of that, the copper equivalent grades have really blown us out of the water, up to almost 23% copper equivalent, with greater than 1% over a significant, consistent area. And then Kibbe Basin, like we discussed, very, very intriguing lithium brine opportunity where a discovery was made on our doorstep. So, Pilot Mountain is the focus, but we continue to add value to each of those assets. And it just takes one. It just takes one in this industry, and potentially those all 3 as complementary assets look better and better each time we go and do more work on them.
You have all of these other assets, and that is great. And I think those have a great value in terms of the overall to gold metal resources. The question, I suppose, is what are, or is there any potential downsides? Okay, you have this tungsten. We know it's there. It exists in the ground. You have a previous JORC. Are there any other tungsten deposits in the US that could suddenly, go, no, we don't want to do Pilot Mountain. We're going to do this instead?
No. I'm glad you asked that, because that's another thing that I think has been overlooked, is the fact that we're really the only show in town. I mean, I've looked at the USGS reports. I've gone through great detail to see what else is available in the US, and we are the only show in town. It's the largest and most advanced undeveloped tungsten deposit on U.S. soil, period. There was a large high-grade tungsten deposit that was completely mined out, that's located in the state of California. That deposit is depleted. It's completely washed out. It's done. That was the only other kind of show in town. And they mined it out completely, I think, at the end of the 1980s. So I've looked at other deposits, other tungsten deposits. I have prospectors send me stuff, and they pale in comparison to the size and the grade at Pilot Mountain. So, we're in the driver's seat here. We're in such a unique position. And, those data points alone, just the fact that the U.S. has no domestic primary production, and this is the largest deposit at a time when tungsten and critical metals are so important. I mean, this cannot be emphasized enough. And I think the market will start to realize here just how important this asset is. And obviously, if we can get some government grant funding and announce that to the market, I think that will really, really highlight very quickly what this asset means. But we, as a management team, understand the value here, and we're going to continue to push this thing forward, given the current geopolitical climate. Very exciting.
So do you think there's going to be some sort of correlation between the price of uranium and price of tungsten, based on the fact that a huge amount of tungsten is required for these reactors, that, these two things are going to go hand in hand? We need more uranium, and we're going to need more tungsten, and neither of them are exactly coming out of every rock. There's not huge quantities of the stuff on the planet.
Yeah. So,
well, there is huge quantities of it, but not in economic amounts.
Yeah. Just an important point there, Kev, is so tungsten, the application of tungsten is into the nuclear fusion industry, whereas obviously uranium is used in nuclear fission. So it's a common mistake, nuclear fusion versus fission. But just on that point, and just a few kind of data points that I think would be quite useful for listeners, are the fact that we signed an MOU with a nuclear fusion. So nuclear fusion is effectively when you fuse these particles together and create a reaction that's similar to the sun, and then look to contain that into a reaction. And there's been a lot of positive strides made in the nuclear fusion space in the UK, Canada, the US, and France of recent, including the first net positive energy gain from those reactions. So that technology is moving very quickly towards commercialization. But the major data point that really blew me away about nuclear fusion is the fact that one nuclear fusion reactor could require as much as 5% of the total tungsten that is consumed globally. I mean, that's just a mind-blowing number. And one of the responses I get to that is, okay, well, when will these reactors actually hit commercialization and start to be built? And the reality is we're probably up to 10 years away. However, what's happening in the meantime is there's so many R&D nuclear fusion reactors being built in the UK, in France, I believe. US just funded one. So these reactors are going to require significant amounts of tungsten. I mean, even if a reactor needed 1% to 2% of what's consumed globally, considering how tight the tungsten market is, I mean, it's just mind-blowing numbers. So those orders for significant amounts of tungsten into that industry could start as soon as 2 years from now, which I think should really highlight the importance of tungsten, not only in its current landscape, but once nuclear fusion continues to move forward here.
So in that fusion situation, basically they're just creating a huge bomb and collecting the energy from the bomb, a contained bomb.
Yeah, well, exactly. It's effectively, it's almost like a bomb, but it's more compared to the sun. So if you created the sun here on Earth, how would you possibly contain that heat and the energy that comes off of that? Well, the only way they can do that is with tungsten, because tungsten has the highest melting point of any metal. So it's not like, you can just take a big slab of iron or steel and just wrap it around this reactor. You need thick walls. I mean, we're talking feet to meters thick of effectively pure tungsten that wraps around this reactor. I mean, I've seen photos of these things. It's pretty incredible. And these tungsten walls are just bombarded with incredibly high heat and energy from these reactors. But because the tungsten is so thick and such a unique thermodynamic property, it can actually contain these reactors. And I spoke to one of the gentlemen at Oxford Sigma who we signed the MOU with, and when I heard the number of the quantum of tungsten required in this industry, I'm like, well, it's impossible. There's just not enough tungsten in the world. They're going to find a way to engineer it out. And he said, this guy is a PhD in tungsten. He's a material science, very, very intelligent guy. And I said, well, they're going to just engineer it out because there's not nearly enough tungsten. And he said, the one metal that we cannot engineer out of these reactors is tungsten. He said, we've tried so hard. but because it's such a unique thermodynamic property, it's the one metal that will be in every tungsten or every nuclear fusion reactor going forward for the foreseeable future. So that should really highlight the importance of securing tungsten supply now and how great a position we are in with Pilot Mountain.
3,422 degrees C, just for listeners who don't know. Yeah. That's how high the melting point is of tungsten.
Exactly.
That's bloody hot.
Yeah. And yet, just another quick note. I don't want to go into too much detail and bore everyone, but the great thing is these walls are so thick, but because the energy is so high, even tungsten can't withstand these reactors. So what happens is the inner parts of the wall will have to be replaced as well. So you're not only just need the tungsten to set these reactors up, but there's also annual consumption that comes with tungsten as well. So it's not like there's one off, but it's like, I mean, that's why I kind of get so carried away here. But nuclear fusion alone could be required as much tungsten as we use globally. Like, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
When you went to see these guys at Oxford Sigma, how excited did they give you some presentations on this and how tungsten's used, etc.? Was it an interesting visit?
Oh, it was incredible. I mean, sitting in a room full of 4 or 5 Oxford, Cambridge educated PhD geophysicists, astrophysicists. I mean, I was blown away. I'm just a lowly geologist over here, so it was really impressive to spend time with those guys. They're all experts in tungsten, and their biggest takeaway point and the reason that we partnered was they understand the importance of tungsten in these reactors. They're trying to bang the drum. They're trying to talk to the US government, the UK government, say, guys, we're investing billions of dollars in this technology, but no one's talking about the supply chain. They're like just trying to wave the flag here and say, we have a huge issue looming here. This technology, if we can perfect it, and when we do, it's going to change the global landscape for energy and how we consume it and the cost of energy. But until we talk about the supply chain, with tungsten being at the top of that list, this is not going to happen. So that's why we partnered together, is because not only do we own the largest undeveloped tungsten asset in the US, but we obviously have very unique connections with, various US government departments now about mining tungsten in the US. We look to partner together to ultimately, with the ultimate goal of creating and supporting a Western world supply chain for tungsten and diffusion and all the other technologies.
Very good. We can hear your excitement. The question that we pose to you is, what is the most interesting, exotic place you've ever spent Christmas Day?
That's a good question, Kevin. I have to think about that. Christmas Day. Honestly, we were always the family growing up that we didn't go away. We always spent it at home. So I honestly, and I kind of liked it that way. I'm from Vancouver originally, so I think having a Christmas with snow on the ground was always a childhood memory that I really appreciated, and I've kind of stuck to it since. Vancouver again this year for Christmas, but probably Vancouver. That's a bit of a boring answer. I apologize.
No. So give us the best Christmas that you've either ever received or gifted.
The best gift I've ever received or gifted.
or maybe gifted.
I think one that stands out, once again, going back to my childhood, was a basketball hoop. I know we met recently, gents, and you were.
I'm not surprised that you play basketball. I don't think Kev is as well, to be honest.
But I didn't know much about basketball, or I didn't care much for it. But my parents got me not one of the ones that you roll around, but it was like cemented into the ground in our backyard. And oh man, I spent so much time on that basketball and playing basketball in college, probably because of that. And I still play today here in London. So that's one that definitely stands out to me and definitely changed the trajectory of my life from that perspective.
Very good. Well, we wish you a very Merry Christmas and a prosperous titanium. Not titanium.
I knew you'd drop it again.
Tungsten, Kevin.
We will.
That's your New Year's resolution, Kevin.
We wish you a very Merry Christmas and a very prosperous tungsten New Year.
Well, I appreciate it, gents, and to you guys as well and your families, and looking forward to what should be a really exciting 2024 for Golden Medal and all the tungsten that we have there at Pilot Mountain. So
yeah, you got to find titanium one of these days. It's going to be a rutile deposit somewhere in Nevada.
Yeah, I think you've manifested enough for us, so it's inevitable.
This will happen. All right. Well, on that note, we'll say Oliver Friesen, CEO of Golden Metal Resources. Thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, gents.
This podcast was brought to you by Roast PR Limited. If you would like to appear on a future episode of The Sunday Roast, please email admin@thesundayroast.net.